We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, well, we warned you. Right?
You read my mind.
What's that from?
That's from Edward Van Sloan's opening to Frankenstein at the behest of his studio head, Carl Laemmle, to warn the audience about the unfolding horror that they might experience by watching James Whale's 1931 classic Frankenstein.
And we'll be talking about that film, along with three other interpretations of the great story of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, of which I have my copy right here. My beautiful pared down Signet classic.
I have my 1957 version from Pyramid Royal that I got on eBay.
Oh, really? Mine's actually my mother's copy from college. You can see her name in there.
Okay.
So I've loved this because it has a great Caspar David Friedrich painting on it. And I think that that's fitting considering Frankenstein's place, which within the pantheon of romanticism that was going on at the time, which you see in various painters and composers and authors, in which people felt that there was a vast horizon of technology and discovery, that was laid out before them in the 19th century, which is partly why this book and story is so exciting to me, and why I think it has lived on throughout the years, because it has so many different interpretations and meanings. It's a very powerful story to me, and I felt like going through this experience of watching these four films and then rereading the book, because I think we both did, gave me a better understanding of the story, and it really makes you think about contemporary political times, what it means to strive for, not even creation, but just achievement, discovery, and how your soul often pays for making such Faustian bargains.
Oh, I agree completely. And I read this book when I was in high school, and I didn't particularly care for it back then, I'll be brutally honest. And I think that's because of my own personal bias towards how much I grew up on and loved the 1931 film that we're going to be talking about. And when you're raised on that, and then you go and read this book that's radically different, it just didn't kind of mesh with me as being a teenager. I didn't really get into it. So when I reread it last month, I really enjoyed it a lot more. I thought I definitely appreciated it on a different level. And then I was thinking to myself, did I actually read it in high school? I have a feeling like I didn't. I have a feeling I just did the Cliff Notes. And that's probably also part of the problem. So
you probably read it and you were like, how come this Frankenstein is talking? That's stupid. He should be
no. I knew about that. I just couldn't get into it. But that was British lit in high school, and I think I just Cliff noted most of those books, to be brutally honest at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had sort of a similar situation, but I actually reread it probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and really, really enjoyed it. And in comparison to something like Dracula, which is a much, much tougher slog of a read, Frankenstein is boom. It's so good. It's very, very quick, very well written, extremely evocative. I mean, the thing about it this time that I noticed on this reread was it was tough for me to read as someone that's gotten older, to where I don't want to say I've gone through it or anything, but the experience of life and death and pain and the fragility of your family life and people you love becomes more apparent as you age. So the book was profoundly sad to me this time around, and very striking, which obviously parallels this somewhat tragic life of Mary Shelley herself. And it didn't so much feel creepy and spooky and cool and edgy like it did when I read it 6 or 7, 10 years ago. It felt it was very painful to read. And also, as someone that you grow older, when you're young, you don't make devastating mistakes like Frankenstein does that you end up paying for, that come back to bite you in the ass, which is something this book I think is also touches on, which is powerful. But I don't want to get too deep into the book here until we start talking about some of the films further down the line. I'd like to talk to you about, Ryan, Universal's Frankenstein, directed by Yeah, go ahead.
1931 was a banner year for the horror genre and for Universal in particular. So earlier in the year, Todd Browning released Dracula, which was a huge success for the studio. And this was a movie that was made begrudgingly by the studio head, Carl Laemmle, at the behest of his son, Laemmle Jr. And because horror was considered, still something not desired as prestige for a major studio. And Universal at this point was still considered a minor studio. They did not have the theater chain distribution network that would put them in league with the majors. Okay. So Dracula becomes this huge breakout success for them. And so naturally, the next thing was, well, what do we got next? And so it's not the same mentality we have nowadays, whereby it's like, okay, let's make a sequel. They eventually did do that. But the idea was, well, let's adapt the next Gothic romantic work. And so Frankenstein was a natural selection after that. And so what's quite fascinating, as we've already alluded to, is how radically different this movie is from the book, like almost in every way, shape, and form. It's pretty profound. And a lot of that has to do with budgetary restraints that were placed upon the production of the picture, and the fact that they chose to adapt the British stage play, really, as a means of convenience for working around the budgetary reduction. So that's where a lot of that comes in.
I was going to talk to you about that because I read or skimmed through this book I had previously read, which is called Frankenstein: A Cultural History by someone named Susan Tyler Hitchcock. And it's a very fun and interesting read, and it devotes a lot of time, unexpectedly to me as a first-time reader, to the play adaptions of Frankenstein, which were very, very popular in the late 19th century, because there was no such thing really as copyright law, so everyone could just do Frankenstein or some form of it, however they liked. And yeah, the idea of Frankenstein is this kind of trundling monster became like part of the image of like the general public, because that's how it was portrayed in the play. That, or it was like Frankenstein and the monster were almost like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of like duo, which partly led to the public lack of awareness around who was the creature and who was the monster. It was because the plays chose to go in that sort of direction. And then, the movie aped what they were doing, which is interesting.
Yeah. And certainly this was not the first film adaptation of Frankenstein. There were earlier versions in the silent era, most famously in 1910, produced by Thomas Edison, of all people. That is considered like the first Frankenstein adaptation. And it's included on the Arrow Blu-ray for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, oddly enough. So I actually got to watch it the other night. And it's pretty good. It's pretty spooky and creepy. It's only about 12 minutes long. It's a lot more kind of mystical or mythical, you would say. Like, he creates the monster in this like giant black pot over like a fire, kind of. So it's not exactly anything that you would expect from the story, but it's kind of an interesting historical artifact.
Sorry, I apologize, guys. I'm screwing up my camera.
No, it's okay.
No, that's cool. So Ryan, one of your favorite movies. Am I wrong?
Oh, no, absolutely. This is one of the best. And it's because of a confluence of different things. And most notably, the combination of Boris Karloff and James Whale. This is like a match made in heaven that would then be, I think, subsequently topped in Bride of Frankenstein. As much as I love this movie and is excellent, and I would say almost faultless that this movie is, Bride of Frankenstein just then supersedes it on like every level after that, which is incredible. It's like our discussion where we talked about the Romero Dead trilogy, is that Night of the Living Dead's a great film, but then Dawn of the Dead just one-ups every single layer of that movie. And so Bride of Frankenstein is like that for here. But it catapults Boris Karloff into superstardom for this portrayal of the monster, which is iconic at this point. There's the Jack Pierce makeup is a cultural, it's part of the cultural milieu. Everyone knows, if you show them a picture of Frankenstein, the Jack Pierce Frankenstein makeup, people will know instantly what it is. It's like one of those things like Mickey Mouse or Superman, so that's how powerful the imagery in this movie is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And obviously people were taken aback by it. So I watched this movie actually probably like 2 years ago, and I was a little let down in the way that I felt that it was somewhat one dimensional. In that, obviously, we're driven to sympathize with Frankenstein, the monster, somewhat, but ultimately, this is maybe the only adaptation of Frankenstein that I've seen where Doctor Frankenstein comes out somewhat unscathed, and you're asked to sympathize with him as sort of a heroic figure by the film's end. Would you agree with that analysis?
I don't know about that. I've definitely felt more sympathy for Dr. Frankenstein in the Kenneth Branagh version. I'll tell you that. As much as
Well,
we'll get into that, and I don't particularly care for that movie, I think that that's the more sympathetic version of the character. In fact, I feel quite the opposite about Colin Clive in this movie. He is like kind of deliciously evil and raving mad as a traditional mad scientist kind of character. Yes, he mellows out by midway through the film when he's kind of like overwhelmed by what he has done, and he's in this like,
yeah,
he's not quite catatonic, but he's just like zoned out midway through, and his performance just radically changes. I don't know that I never felt true sympathy for him, but I was fascinated by him.
yeah, he's fantastic and a really interesting actor from what I've heard. He's sort of a troubled actor, but he delivers a very like sort of indelible performance, especially in the sequences in which he, creates the creature, right? Um, I was going to say
Also,
though, I mean, he never,
the body mannerisms too, and the way that he moves around in the
yeah,
creation scene, particularly the manner of like ecstasy that he is feeling and displaying after creating the monster is unlike anything that you're going to see in any either contemporary films or later film adaptations of this or anything else. I mean, even just the way he then sprawls out with the table, it's
yeah,
alive. And now I know what it's like to be God. It's like, it's so thrilling.
it's cool, it's amazing, and it also you have to give it up to the movie for the embracing of the idea of lightning being the agent that brings the creature to life, which is not readily apparent in the book. In the book, it's sort of like extremely vague. And the creation of the monster is a very, very small portion of the book. Whereas in the films, it's always sort of the showpiece, somewhat, not in all the films we're going to talk about. But I would say, though, would you disagree with me with, look, obviously Kenneth Branagh, his character of Frankenstein, or to some degree, all of the adaptions ask you to sympathize with Dr. Frankenstein somewhat, but he can't escape like the judgment of fate and like the
Yes,
judgment of natural law. And this Dr. Frankenstein does not experience any kind of like tragic comeuppance for what he's done, right? It's sort
correct.
of like, oh, we chased the monster we burned him alive. Thank God. Now we can get married, right?
Correct. They did tack on a happy ending to this movie. And there was a lot of debate from what I've read about what to do with Dr. Frankenstein at the end of this movie. In the original version that Robert Florey penned, it was apparently going to be shot by, I think, the father of little Maria, who was killed by the monster, something like that. And of course, they set it up that he's going to be destroyed by the monster in the windmill. But I think they just decided, I don't know if they were because they were planning to do the sequel or for other reasons, just to kind of allay the audience's sense of like dread and oppressiveness of how kind of heavy the movie was. They decided to go with the happy ending, which I don't mind.
And you could see that because obviously they felt the need to tack on like a disclaimer at the beginning, you know. Which, that look, obviously the movie is not shocking today. We see this version of Jack Pierce's Frankenstein on every Halloween, Home Depot blow up Frankenstein, disgusting low pro Halloween, decorations. Right? Do you have blow up decorations for Halloween out in front of your yard right now?
I do not. I've been
Okay, all right,
tempted,
good. I know there's been a lot of discourse around, the class sensitivity of like certain Halloween decorations this year. But my point is he's become just like such a touchstone. Like kids will draw Frankenstein and it's no big deal or scary. Right. But obviously in this film, I think that if you really do watch it, first of all, in my rewatch, I was very struck by just the atmosphere of it all. It's a beautiful, spectacular looking movie. And I watched it on, I have, HBO Plus or whatever the hell. And it was on there and it looked tremendous. I mean, robbing the graves in the beginning was incredible. The sets are impeccable. it's a very, I mean, it's just an indelible Halloween fixture, and it set the stage for many, many movies after it. I mean, you can't get away with making a Frankenstein film without involving electricity, lightning, and the birthing of a monster anymore. You have to do it. You know, it's even if you're making a film which is ostensibly trying to like be as close to the book as possible, you can't escape it. People will feel ripped off.
Oh, absolutely. And we see that in the other films that we're going to be talking about today that are trying to be more literary adaptations of the book. They include either direct lines of dialogue or references to this film included in them because they've been so, intrinsically connected to the character that you cannot escape it. And I like that. I like that transferred over. Like, they gave something back to this work of classic fiction. Oh, sorry. Just want to piggyback off what you just said. The set design. What I really love, and you can see this I have the 4K UHD, which looks also spectacular. But I love how artificial kind of this world looks too. Like, and you can see this. I've never noticed it on prior versions, maybe because it's been so, redone. When I say that, I say artificial in a good way. So like those scenes where they're robbing the graves or they're outside in the mountains or whatever, that's all a matte painting behind them. They're on a soundstage, and it just looks, it gives this expressionistic view that you're living in some kind of other weird world that you would not be in the real world otherwise. So I love that. And in fact, the only time he takes you out of it, I never noticed that before, and I probably wouldn't even have picked up on it because I'm so engrossed in the movie. There is one scene where the curtain is like kind of like folded or curved, and it's like you can see.
It doesn't matter though. It's still
no,
you get what
matter.
you're going for. Yeah, 100%. I would say that the Guillermo del Toro version, and obviously we'll get to that last, but I would say that movie straddles that line a little bit sometimes of like feeling sort of fake or put on like a production in a way that like draws attention to itself and its style. That makes you feel like it's makes you feel like you're in a storybook world or something. But which is interesting.
Should we talk about some of the actors and the performances? We talked about Colin Clive, who's excellent in the movie. I love this. The depiction or description of actors' eyes, I think, is going to become a recurring theme for how we talk about a lot of the different, at least for me, especially in the Del Toro version. But the Colin Clive, his eyes give this manic, crazed, psychotic look at times, and it is just delightful. Okay. That plus his weird vocal cadence is also something that just mesmerizes me every time that I watch it. Like him just describing the act of what he has done. It's like this body had. So like, for instance, when he's talking to Dr. Waldman and Dr. Waldman's kind of like dressing him down and like, you think you can give life back to this dead body. And he's like, this body has never lived. I stitched it together with my own hand. And it's just so wonderful. Okay.
Right.
Second, Dwight Fry. I know we're just like we're not even talking about Karloff, which is bizarre, but like Dwight Fry as the Hunchback here also gets my vote for one of the best performances in the movie. It's so quirky, it's so off kilter, and it's like these little things, like him getting scared by the bouncing skeleton in the classroom, or like dropping the brain. He goes and fixes his sock at one moment for no reason. Just these little things that you notice. It's like this guy needed to be in more movies. Like you'll see him pop up here and there, but what a sad, tragic kind of guy.
Absolutely. Why was it then that in the public consciousness, Peter Lorre became so identified with the character of the Igor and the sort of mad scientist henchman?
I don't know. That's bizarre. Cause like when you go back to these, there's Dwight Fry obviously he's playing Fritz in this movie, which is a character that was pulled over from the stage play. Obviously in the novel, there's no Hunchback assistant. And then Bela Lugosi famously played the true Igor in the Universal cycle in Son of Frankenstein, which is a great movie. But yeah, I don't know why Peter Lorre, maybe the voice or just his own physical like resemblance to kind of a weird Hunchback character. Like he's short and diminutive kind of guy. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting too that in 3 out of these 4 movies, they took a page out of the comic book sidekick handbook, and they always give Dr. Frankenstein some kind of like either patron or friend or assistant who is sort of a sounding board for exposition, which is interesting. But
well, I think you have to. I think you have to,
yeah,
because you
yeah.
can't. The book, that's what's so great about the book, is that it is so kind of deep in its philosophical musings that you can just
Mhm.
pontificate for pages and pages. It doesn't go overboard by any means, but that's what's so great about that. It's really hard to adapt that into a film. And I think that's personally why I have a lot of issues with the later films, that it kind of just skirts over a lot of that, especially with the monster. And so we'll get into that later. But this movie doesn't really try to do that. It's trying, because I think they had the benefit of adapting like a stage play that already kind of had its foundations in place. It moves pretty quickly. It has action. It has pathos, and it kind of just pays off. Like there's no time for BS in this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I would note that too, in all three of the subsequent versions that interact with the original novel in some way or another, they all have this issue of feeling like they're rushing to get to the end. Would you? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Now, this is tough to
Absolutely.
talk about. I actually think I'll have more to say about this movie as we move on through the other films, because this one obviously set the precedent for what the public believes Frankenstein is to a certain extent, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and my issue with it in a overall holistic conversation about Frankenstein is that there's just not enough of the book to go off of with this film. Now, on its own, it's fantastic. Obviously, it's a classic of cinema. It would probably fit better in a conversation about universal monsters in general, rather than amongst other films that strive to all pull something interesting out of the novel. Would you agree?
Oh yeah. I think though, to be fair, I think if you pair this with Bride of Frankenstein, you get a kind of more holistic version of what the
True.
book was trying to do, because it does incorporate a lot of other elements missing from this film. And of course, because both are very short, the
Yeah.
runtime together is probably something around 2.5 hours. And you get a wild, weird adaptation, but it is like fits more with the book's kind of like worldview, I guess.
Well, first of all, I'd like to piggyback off Bride of Frankenstein, which is truly one of the weirdest and different sequels ever made in Hollywood, right?
Oh yeah.
Even more interesting considering it's a companion to this film. But I mean, there's a lot of interesting things in that film. I mean, first of all, it's beautiful. You know, The Bride of Frankenstein, equally as indelible a creation as Frankenstein himself, perhaps, um, with the hair. And then you have just interesting little oddities like the miniature people. There's just all sorts of
Dr.
stuff going on with that film that's
Pretorius,
really,
the show's
yeah,
scene
yeah,
stealer, Dr. Pretorius, played by Ernest Thesiger, definitely.
totally. But you know,
What?
you did mention. Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say you mentioned the line. Now I know what it feels like to be God. Thank you. Yeah, we get it. You know what I'm saying? Like they're all fun. Those are nice scene chewing lines. But like, go ahead.
But how scandalous such a line
True.
is in 1931 is part of the reason why I brought it up. It is so provocative. It is so out there. In fact, it was actually cut from the movie and then re-edited in years later. I mean, this movie was edited and
Oh, really?
censored very heavily. In
Oh,
fact, the scene where the monster drowns the little girl was also butchered. And then I believe in the 80s, they found a lot of the missing scenes and reintegrated it back together for the VHS release. So,
oh,
I
I
mean,
didn't
you
know
have to
that.
think back about how different a world. We're talking almost 100 years ago at this point, right? So,
Yeah.
how different morals and mores were, and what we expect today. Now, you mentioned the movie is not scary, and I'm not going to argue that the movie is scary or frightening. Okay, but I was just watching it again the other night, and I'm like, there is still some moments of like actual very good suspense and dread, especially when the monster is sneaking up on Elizabeth and crawling
Yeah.
in to her bedroom and then just kind of sneaking up on her gradually. That is kind of scary when you see, especially how kind of gruesome the monster makeup is in this one. I feel like they sort of like make it a little bit more friendly looking in some of the subsequent movies. This one looks really cadaverous and really gross. And I like that. Those are some of the more kind of tenuous scenes of the movie.
I don't want to say the movie's not scary or not spooky or have great atmosphere. It definitely does, right? But I mean, you would be able to show this to us probably a small child today and have them not
Oh yeah,
I
no,
don't
no.
know.
I'm
Maybe.
just saying.
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
mean, it
saying,
wouldn't.
like
Yeah,
comparatively, I think that has the fundamentals there of what's kind of like creepy, and you're watching it just kind of slowly creep up. Those have some moments, you know.
I think though the thing about the story though is that it's been so utilized and
Yeah.
bastardized as a pop culture image, Frankenstein, that people forget about the extremely sort of grotesque and subversive the source material was at the time, and like sort of still is. You know, it takes sometimes a filmmaker like Guillermo del Toro to tell you, no, this is a movie about someone that chopped up dead bodies and sewed them together, right? To get you to be like, oh, that's right. I kind of forgot that. You know, I just thought Frankenstein was like this big green guy that walked around. You know, but no, this is a almost 200-year-old novel that still has a sort of really subversive bent to it. Kind of like how I described how I think Rope is Hitchcock's most
Subversive.
aggressive
Yeah.
subversive horror film. You know, I mean, it's the subject matter is, oh yeah, it's a drawing room thriller. Okay, about two guys who experimentally kill their best friend and invite his family over to dine on top of his coffin. You know, I mean,
And
it's a very
you're meant to not empathize with, but you're meant to relate to those characters as your protagonist too. That's what's subversive about that and this too, is that you're put into the shoes of the kind of morally depraved characters.
absolutely. I want to thank Deep Rex for becoming a member. I want to thank everyone for tuning into the stream. I got Trembling Colors here says the Bernie Wrightson and illustrated Frankenstein is terrific too, but sadly hard to find these days physically. I'm not aware of like what that is, but I know I've seen Bernie Wrightson's illustrations of Frankenstein. Actually, if you look really hard at the thumbnail for this video, I actually included his illustration of the monster confronting Dr. Frankenstein after he refuses to make him a mate, which is an incredible drawing by Bernie Wrightson with just like this plethora of like, it's like the perfect mad scientist laboratory with all the chemicals and beakers and electric, you know, hubs and modules. And it's like, it's phenomenal. So yeah, Bernie Wrightson, I first encountered his work when I read the illustrated Stand, a Stephen King book. And I've always loved him since. It's birthday today, I think.
Oh,
Go
really?
ahead.
Also,
Yeah.
to go off the laboratory set design, it's actually, you bring up an interesting point. You know, just since we recently discussed and watched Dr. X, it's a quite contrasting setup in that Dr. X features a lot of like what we think of like classical mad scientist laboratory stuff where there's bubbling chemicals and test tubes and all that. You don't,
Sure.
there's not a whole lot of that here. It's a much more science fiction kind of realization of that type of equipment. It's a lot more physical, electrical equipment, which feels more modern, which is quite striking.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think I read somewhere that they had originally toyed with the idea of making this movie futuristic, and then they settled on doing more of a gothic old school style. But you know, something I was going to mention when we get to Kenneth Branagh is that the height of all these sets, everything is very vertically inclined. You know, obviously because you have the lightning coming down from the sky to give life to our monster, but like the tower is like so high, which Guillermo also apes. But interestingly enough, Kenneth Branagh instead decided to go horizontal rather than vertical in his
He
setup of
went
the
more hammer, didn't
laboratory.
he?
He
With
did.
the
He
tail.
did go more hammer.
Yeah.
So if you don't have anything else to say about Frankenstein, I can pivot to the other films. Or do you want to finish up, wrap up on
I think we
the
should just
original
talk
here?
about Karloff real quick, since we didn't
Sure.
quite talk much about him. The
Yeah.
performance is, of course, it's very understated. He's both extremely frightening at times, like I was describing frightening. I'm not saying like, oh my God, I was having nightmares and couldn't turn off the lights, but like to not only the scene where I described where he's stalking Elizabeth in her bedroom, but I think the scene where he is chained up in the basement and like has his arms up in the air and is screaming bloody murder, while then Fritz goes in and starts tormenting him with the torch. That's a
Right.
great scene, as well as then when he breaks loose and he is trying to get through the door and Frankenstein and Dr. Waldman are like holding on for dear life. So that the sympathy of the monster here, I think, is like maybe too much overstated. I don't particularly feel for him in this movie. I think he is more monstrous and malevolent, and he is meant to be portrayed that way. In Bride, he goes 180 as a truly tragic kind of character.
Yeah, absolutely. Why do you think that is?
I think that maybe James Whale would have been bored otherwise, just doing the same thing, and so it was time to make the character more complex. We have
That
him
actually, yeah,
more as an instrument of plot in this movie. Like, he is he is the creation, and he drives the narrative at the end, at the climax. But then he becomes, I think, the monster becomes the main character of Bride more so. I think Colin Clive is still, and this is part of, I think, James Whale's inherent bias, is that from what I was reading, he loved to use his like little cavalcade of actors that he had as friends, and Colin Clive was among them.
yeah.
And because Karloff became like the breakout star of this movie, there was like, maybe there was some like resentment too. But anyway, whatever happened, they were able to then channel that into making the monster like headline in Bride. And I think it was to the movie's success.
Well, I was going to say it reminds me a little bit about the like transition between King Kong and Son of Kong. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
in King Kong, the filmmakers sort of showed their, I don't know, like chauvinism or whatever, human bias chauvinism, in that like they killed King Kong. And I think it's sort of retroactively remembered as being a tragic moment, but I don't know if it really is if you watch the original film. But then
Yeah.
there was sort of a public outcry and like loving of King Kong. So when this time came for a sequel, you find the Carl Denham character in that movie meeting King Kong's son and being apologetic for killing his dad. And then Son of Kong is the hero of that film and good, and not someone who's meant to be killed. Because, the noticeable change in that film is that when they have King Kong on display, all chained up, you don't find Ann Darrow being like, "Oh, I feel so bad for King Kong." She goes, "Well, I had to come here and be part of the show because I had to help out Carl Denham. Isn't this cool?" And then there's no pathos for the monster necessarily, other than like a sort of human tragedy that I guess would be touched on in like Guillermo's movie a little bit. And if I remember to
Oh,
beat that point,
way more. I mean, but Del
yeah,
Toro, that's his like modus operandi
wheelhouse.
is always going to be, I identify with the monster. The audience should sympathize with the monster. And there's nothing wrong with that. But this is a different world. This is a different, century of what we're
Yeah,
dealing with here. And I think that would have been asking the audience way too much in 1931 to be like
sure.
rooting for this, corpse that's been brought back to life, an unholy abomination that, defies the law of God and everything. Whereas
Mhm.
I think he had enough goodwill built up for the sequel that he could test the waters with the audience and see what he could do.
I would have to say I don't know this for a fact, but I think that the audience might have had a hand in that, and that they inexplicably fell in love with this creature. But are you ready to
Oh
jump
yeah,
ahead several decades? So we could have done a Hammer Dracula. We could have done your guy who did Dark Shadows. He did a Dracula movie. I mean, a Frankenstein movie.
Frankenstein, man, come on.
I know. Can you believe this? And we could have done, who's the guy that did Dark Shadows? What's his name? Dan Curtis,
Dan
right?
Curtis.
Dan Curtis did a Frankenstein movie. I'm shocked you didn't argue for that. Um, so we've talked about the Hammer Frankenstein before on a previous Hammer show. It's fantastic.
And
And
we
then
could
the
have done a
sequel.
Hammer sequel,
We could have done a Hammer
some of
sequel.
which are quite good.
Instead, we chose to go back to like literally our biggest buddy on this channel, Roger Corman, who we've like done to death, right? I don't think we go 2 shows without talking about Roger Corman, but I was kind of intrigued by the one movie he returned to direct after a hiatus of 15 years in the director's chair, which was the 1990 film Frankenstein Unbound, which is based on a science fiction novel by Brian Aldiss of Super Toys Last All Summer Long, the source material for artificial intelligence fame. And I was very intrigued by this movie. I can't say that I loved it, but it's definitely interesting. Ryan, would you do the audience a favor and fill them in on the premise of this thing? And by the way, how did you watch it? Did you buy this?
I don't think that it is available to buy, as far
Did
as
you
I can
watch the
tell.
Did you watch
I
the
watched
YouTube video
the
that
YouTube
said
Blu-ray
Blu-ray
quality.
quality? Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Spoiler alert: it's not
Not
Blu-ray quality.
not even close. Yeah.
Misnomer. Yeah.
You sent
So
me a
so
text going, loving it, right?
But I did. I actually really enjoy this. And believe it or not, I was dreading watching this because as much as I
Oh,
love Corman, once you start getting into the stuff that he stopped directing, oh, there you go. Now you're
look
in
how
full.
nice it
Now
is
you're
now.
Blu-ray quality, George. Okay,
I am truly. Yeah, look at that.
you are now unbound
I
to
don't know.
be in full HD. So once you start getting out of the 70s and into the stuff that Corman was just producing and not directing in like the 80s and especially the 90s, stuff is just like crap. Okay, sorry, no offense. But when I watched this, I was like, oh, he's back in the driver's seat. He hasn't lost the touch. You know, he's still got it. There's that. Okay, to describe the movie, I don't even know how you can describe this movie. It is a weird mishmash of three different things. It's a mishmash of the actual Mary Shelley Frankenstein, plus the characters from the novel interacting with the authors of the author of the book, plus her compatriots, Lord Byron and Percy Shelley, and then a third story. So we begin in the far off futuristic year of 2031. And a scientist named something, Dr. Buchanan, played by John Hurt, is working on some kind of super laser apocalyptic weapon that is like 10 billion times more worse than a nuclear bomb. And it's creating these time vortexes in the sky, in the clouds. And somehow he gets sucked into the time vortex while driving his Knight Rider inspired car that talks. And he ends up back in 1818 or so in the time of Frankenstein. And of course, this is a weird world that I just described where Victor Frankenstein, the monster, and all the characters from the novel coexist with Mary Shelley, Lord Byron, and Percy Shelley, which is incredibly meta of this whole endeavor.
Yeah.
And so I guess he just like naturally joins their world and starts getting involved in the plot as a way to kind of like interject himself and hopefully find a way to get back to the future.
Pretty much. There's a lot of Back to the Future kind of, I wouldn't say inspired, because maybe, you know, Bob Gale and Zemeckis read this book when it was released in 71, right? But there's a lot to do with harnessing the power of a car to do things in the future. And, you know, I like this movie. It's got a great cast, which is atypical of a Corman production. Now, however, this was a slightly elevated Corman production with like a budget of like, what, 10 million or something?
Yeah, and he was paid $1 million to direct it, which is quite unusual too. I'm sure he couldn't say no to that.
Yeah, it's pretty unusual, but it does have the, it does have like the grace of having an interesting and fun premise that also manages to fit in enough gory thrills. And I didn't see any nudity. Did I miss something in the Blu-ray quality? But yeah, that was sort of uncharacteristic for our guy.
Especially with Bridget Fonda in the cast.
One of the most beautiful women of the 90s. Absolutely. Who, by the way, Lord Byron and Percy talk about free love. I practice it. That was one of my favorite lines when she gets down with John Hurt. And I've always been a big John Hurt fan. I think he was fun in this for sure. He's a nice grounding.
He carries this movie. I don't think that I would be praising it as much as I am had he not been in such a large portion of it, and just with his voice and his lines, like just that carries it for me. That just chips it over the edge, you know, to make it like camp.
Though I did feel like the budget was elevated. It did feel sometimes like, and I don't know if I want to say it was cheapness, but it felt like it was cheap. an episode of Wishbone, when he like, you know, comes into the world of the book and he's walking around and he's like, oh, hello, you're Dr. Frankenstein. Gee whiz. Right. You know, like you know what I'm talking about? Everyone remember Wishbone? It was like a dog who would go into books.
Well, what I was going to say is, the monster is a great example of the cheapness of it. The monster looks like a refugee from the Fox Kids Goosebumps show to me. That's how cheap he looks here.
He kind of like, what was that one? What is it? The From Beyond or whatever, where the guy's got his face in the deal, or like, you know, this was a big effect in the 90s where you could make it look like a guy's face was like stretched out weird by like adding some prosthetics to the side. Yeah. RoboCop does this. You know, they do it in fucking From Beyond and Hellraiser and stuff.
This is where the movie fails. I was surprised with the practical makeup effects. Like that was shocking that the monster effects were not up to par. I was absolutely shocked with.
You know what wasn't up to par, I guess, was like the introduction of Frankenstein. Like he's like walking around and then all of a sudden Frankenstein's like, here I am.
Oh, the monster. You mean.
Yeah. The monster. Sorry. I'm going to do that a bunch. I apologize.
The doctor
I have the normie disease.
The doctor has a great introduction in this movie where John Hurt encounters him at a cafe or a restaurant. And he's like, mind if I sit down with you, sir? He's like, just totally ignoring him. And then he's like, after they have their little conversation and he's impressed by the digital wristwatch, he's like, what's your name? It's like, Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein. It's like, Okay, cool.
Well, I love Raul Julia. I don't know what kind of shape his career was in at this point. I thought he was an effective Frankenstein, even if he was a little one note and just kind of evil, right?
He's got
And
the macho bravado, which I think carries it enough for this movie.
well, I did like it. I don't want to say I didn't, but like, I feel like it sort of squanders its meta potential. You could have like a lot of things where you have an author inhabiting the world of her own story, which she will end up writing, and then someone traveling back through time to exist within this world. And I don't feel like they capitalized on that enough. We get a scene with
Yeah.
Mary Shelley and him where he goes, "Yes, you will one day write a very good book." It's like, this is all you're
But
going to do with it?
let's be
Like,
real. Let's be real.
yeah.
It is a Corman film, so they're only going to dance around on the surface of these types of ideas.
The one idea that I felt like transcended here, which is obviously, I think a lot of people know that Frankenstein, the novel, there's a character who parallels the trajectory of Dr. Frankenstein, which is the Arctic explorer. Now, this was obviously the age of exploration. People were trying to go to the Arctic. That was the shit. It was the moon of its day, right? And there's an Arctic explorer who meets Dr. Frankenstein, and through hearing Frankenstein's story, understands maybe I shouldn't be so Faustian in my pursuits and jeopardize the lives of myself and all these people with my scientific, with my goals of, being well-renowned, and I should turn my shit back, right? And so the big change here is that the author Brian Aldiss, or Corman, invites you to occupy that role as you, the audience, being like, because that's the one change, which is that John Hurt is the Arctic explorer character, right?
Precisely.
You know what I'm right?
But
So
it's a much more relevant change because what he's working on feels more relevant to modern day society than I'm sailing to the North Pole and I'm endangering my crew, which we can understand that and put ourselves in that situation for what time period that was set in. But for him working on whatever apocalyptic laser beam he's supposed to be constructing that's going to destroy the world and disrupt the space-time continuum, that is like maybe makes a little bit more, I hate to say it, makes a little bit more sense in this day and age.
Yes, or it allows you to kind of understand, like, hey, we're still doing these things now with, be it nuclear energy or, whatever Corman would think was
Well, maybe
stupid or
nowadays they
bad.
could do it with, developing some kind of mutated virus in a lab or something,
Exactly. Don't be doing that. Don't be doing a virus in the lab, or whatever, allegedly. But like, and then at the end, we get a kind of Planet of the Apes style, very 70s kind of twist where the whole world has been destroyed and is filled with like, deformed people. I mean, right. I mean, was that kind of what yeah. So
I guess, or there had been the apocalypse and nothing is left really besides just the remnants and mutations.
I guess I don't understand why Mary Shelley and like Lord Byron and all these people had to be involved in this.
Yeah, that didn't quite make any sense, and neither does the end of the movie after he lasers the monster to death and he is unbound. I'm not sure what that meant or is supposed to mean, but I don't put much stock in that. It's more about just enjoying the ride here.
But you liked it.
Oh, I liked it. Yeah. So why I like it. So another thing, it feels so comic book. It feels like we're in the midst of like our annual DC Comics Justice League meets the Justice Society kind of crossover thing where the worlds are converging and people from this earth are meeting their counterparts. And so, the authors of the story are also involved, which is something we'd see in a DC kind of situation like that. So that appeals to me on that level. Also, the climax where you described it, where Frankenstein's monster and Dr. Buchanan get sucked up into the cloud again, into the post-apocalyptic world, and they do battle on this like cheesy 1990s like neon lit underground cavern where there's lasers shooting everywhere and stuff, and it's so schlocky, it's so just cheap, but that's the kind of stuff I like stuff like that. It's unabashedly shameless.
But it's also like creative and different.
Yeah.
And I think that, even though you have this kind of laboratory, like you said, where there are like circuits on the wall, right. Like that's, futuristic and stuff. You have John Hurt, like giving it his absolute all as he snaps, and it controls the lasers as they shoot into
Yeah.
Frankenstein, and he goes, oh, the monster. I mean, sorry, the creature, Frankenstein's creature.
Yeah.
There's enough like little violence of like pulling somebody's heart out and beating the shit out of people and stuff, and pulling the head off of Frankenstein's fiance, right? That's a little, so it's suffering a lot of indignities in these films, that character.
I
But
know.
yeah.
So
Anyway,
I surprisingly, I was pleasantly surprised here. I'm glad you recommended this one because I would have never watched it otherwise. Because I would see the poster and it's the creepy eyeball with the black background, and I'm like, come on, Frankenstein Unbound.
actually, I thought that poster was kind of cool. Maybe that's just me.
Cool,
I
but
was
it's like what is this? So I also read when I was reading about it beforehand, it was like, oh, it's not even an adaptation of Frankenstein. It's like something else. I thought it was gonna be like Dean Koontz Frankenstein or some other like offshoot, something like that on that level. But then when it actually did merge, the actual Mary Shelley stuff with it, I was like, oh, this is intriguing.
Well, I think that's something too that's important though when you talk about Frankenstein, is just how much like the lore of Frankenstein anymore has intersected with like the lore of Mary Shelley's life. Like think about a film like what's his name? Guy who did The Devils and Lair of the White Worm and Listomania, you know what I'm talking about? Ken Russell. Ken Russell's movie Gothic is also a film that we could have watched, which endeavors to kind of retell the story of that fateful, fortnight stay at Lord Byron's estate where Mary Shelley concocted the story, which, has been fascinating people for a long time, especially because, the author herself is fascinating. I don't know if you're ready to transition to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but I'm kind of doing it, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, no, but to go off that same note, how does Bride of Frankenstein begin? Do you remember?
I do. Yes, you're right. It does begin with incorporating the Mary Shelley mythology. I think people are just so taken with that, the idea of this story like springing to the mind of this young woman in a dream, because it does seem like incongruous at first that a woman of the 19th century of proper breeding and like etiquette would come up with something so ghastly. And that's part of like the appeal, I think, to some people. But I think especially if you look at Mary Shelley's book and you look at the Kenneth Branaugh film and the Guillermo film, I think you can see, and in my opinion, this has become very clear in re-exploring the story in preparation for this, is that Frankenstein is an incredibly sort of, wouldn't want to say it's a feminist story, but it could only have been written by a woman. I think it's very informed from a female perspective, in my opinion. And I suppose we can unpack that a little bit later, but no, I think it makes sense that this book was written by a woman, because as much as our two auteurs who did the other two films we're about to talk about want to bulk up the character of the love interest of Frankenstein, you kind of don't have to, because they want to do that because they don't want the female role to be like a role of nothing, which it kind of is in the book, right? What's his cousin's name? Elizabeth, right? Is Isabel one of those?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. Yeah.
Elizabeth.
She's kind of this just like gentle flower who then ultimately becomes a victim of Frankenstein in the larger story of the conflict between the creature and his creator. Right. But the story, in my opinion, is so clearly written by a woman. I don't think you need that. And I guess I could explain what I'm talking about.
Please do.
And I think this comes through, especially in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. There's a line in the movie that comes from the book where Dr. Frankenstein says to the captain, allay all of your dreams of trying to like explore, where you shouldn't go and trying to achieve greatness. Don't do that, because being a normal stay-at-home guy can be good too. Like living a normal life is like, just do that. Right. Which, I mean, is that sexist to say that's something that probably a lot of women are looking for out of their husbands? I mean, isn't this a classic story of like the guy working too hard? I mean, don't we get this reiterated constantly, whether it's meant or whether it's implicit or not, that like men are sort of these Faustian creatures that want to push the boundaries of everything. And women, I think, now, not all women, many of them do, but like, I think a lot of them would say like this inclination of men to forcibly bend the will of reality to them at the expense of their families and wives is not good. And look what'll happen to you if you do. And you see that Kenneth Branaugh in his film, he wrangles with that incredibly heavily with his own sort of like a tourist bent, right? Yeah. But this idea of like sacrificing hearth and home, that's what the story's about. Dr. Frankenstein destroys his family life and like, and potential happiness with his pursuit of like greatness. Thoughts? Am I totally off base there?
No, I don't think you're off at all. And I think that's what that's what's great about this version of the film. And I know you love this movie. I am lukewarm on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but I will give it credit for what it really does right, and it as being the closest adaptation of the book that has been put to screen and probably ever will, other than probably some like stupid BBC or Hallmark kind of like 5-part miniseries adaptation, which would be uninteresting to watch. This has the emotional romanticism, pumped up to the highest level, like you were just describing, and I think it's effective.
It's very unabashedly bombastic, this movie.
Yeah.
Right. And
it's very 90s.
But you know what, dude? Kenneth Branaugh fucking was the king in the 90s, dude. I mean, how familiar are you with some of the work he did in the 90s? I mean, this was a guy who...
I mean, it's very Shakespearean on a certain level too. The way it's dramatized.
This was a guy who was thought of at the time. I mean, he still is. I think people still really respect Kenneth Branaugh, right? I think his career has gone a lot more commercial than I think a lot of people would have anticipated, because he was thought of at the time as like, he was like a new Orson Welles. He made this Henry V movie out of nowhere. He came and made Henry V, and reinvigorated Shakespeare in the public consciousness to where he made his 4-hour Hamlet, his very good Much Ado About Nothing, which is a great movie you guys should check out. But I mean, like, he became like this promoter of like the classics in pop culture and someone that was very well thought of, so he did this, and it's obviously bombastic, but cinematic too, and recalls some of the classic Universal horror, I think, with the incongruity of the giant impossible staircase in the set of the house, right? Which he has a lot of fun with. But, and Kenneth Branagh's movies have a tendency to be all about how awesome Kenneth Branagh is and how much he can be shirtless and run around and be handsome and have long hair and sweaty and, fall in love with...
surprisingly buff. I was not expecting that, and how much shirtless Kenneth Branagh there was in this movie.
Yeah, but I appreciate that. My wife was like, I watched it with her the other night, and she was like, this is way too over the top. And she was laughing at certain things, and I'm like, I don't know. It works for me. I like it.
She is correct. She is correct. And that's part of the reason I don't care for this so much. It is way too over dramatic at times. And the two great examples are when the monster is standing in front of the burning cottage or whatever, and he's like, I will have my revenge, Frankenstein. And he's had his hands in the air, and it's like, oh my God, come on. Like, we wouldn't even see this on a Saturday morning cartoon. Come on. This is like too much. That, and then the slow motion fight in the Alps and the Arctic when they're lunging out at each other. Come on. Way too over the top.
I just think about that scene when, they're trying to stop the mechanical hand from crushing Amadeus or whatever. And he's like, I fixed it. You need to help me. It's like, almost like the intensity of like an anime or something. It's like got a lot going on, but, and I don't think it has the visual tricks and aesthetics that like something like Bram Stoker's Dracula does, which I think is appropriate to compare, because they were both Columbia efforts to, I guess they really thought it'd be a cool idea to like have star-studded casts that would, remake these classic horror ideas, but, have them be faithful to the novel somewhat. And obviously Robert De Niro here, this is interesting. I think he's good in the movie. I don't know why he would want to do this role. I don't think there's like enough for him to do. I just can't imagine him getting up at 5 a.m. every day and getting this makeup bodysuit put on to, I mean, really, he has one really great monologue, which comes right out of the book. I have passions in me you would not believe, and I have, hatreds that you would not understand. If I cannot, fulfill one, I will indulge the other. That kind of stuff is always really cool. But like,
and I don't know. The movie shines, though, in my opinion. That's where the movie shines, is when they actually kind of put their spin on the, philosophical musings of what the monster's inner turmoil and thought process is. And this is what always gets condensed and glossed over in the more superficial ways that make it uninteresting, is like they show him always going to the cabin of the family that he's going to be the benefactor of. And it just kind of skirts over things, and it feels very unearned. Whereas in the book, I know you don't have the time to do all this. And that's the problem, is that they're sacrificing this because they feel like, I think most audience people would not be interested in this. And it's probably correct. But like that time the monster spends on his own learning to be human is the most interesting part of of the book for me. So the fact that it's just kind of like, it feels like very quick and unearned in the film is like I just waiting for it to pass.
And that's something that Guillermo really focuses on in his film, though. He doesn't even give it the justice that the book does, right?
No. It's better in that movie, but it's still not quite there.
Yeah. And with this, I really do like, to me, a key part of the relationship between Frankenstein and his creation is the tit for tat that escalates their relationship to the point where they are chasing each other to the ends of the earth, right? And in the novel,
Yes.
it starts with the murder of the young brother, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what I wish they would have kept with the book, which makes Frankenstein a less compelling character, but somebody that I think you can identify with as just a tragic person and puts you in this predicament, like a moral predicament, is that he has the suspicion that the governess did not kill the younger brother, but he doesn't know exactly for sure. And he could maybe say something and incriminate himself about his monstrous creation, but he doesn't, and sees her sent to her death, right? Yes. In this book, Frankenstein is off the hook because she gets whisked away by the forces of the mob justice. And they, you know what I'm saying? Right. So it kind of,
yeah,
he gets off the hook.
That's another over the top scene. The hanging.
They throw her off the highest. Oh man.
It's fine. It's just, I mentioned the BBC Hallmark kind of adaptation.
Yeah,
and
what
to
fucking
me,
Hallmark adaptation of Frankenstein would there?
There's no Hallmark adaptation of Frankenstein, but there's like the Hallmark Channel, like back, I don't know, probably in the 80s or 90s. I think I don't know why I'm thinking this. I might be conflating it with some other like basic cable channel. I feel like there's always literary adaptations of great works of fiction, and this has vibes of that. It's not quite there, but it's like almost there. It's the kind of movie that's safe enough for you to show to like a high school class who's read the book, and which is how I was introduced to this movie. And I probably have some like resentment or like bitterness from that, perhaps. I don't know.
No. Kenneth Branaugh and Steven Spielberg are in a competition to see whose movies can be shown in high school the most, right? Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like safe enough. Like it's not gonna, there's not like a whole bunch of nudity. There's a little bosom unbuttoning with the
and the violence is minimal too, even though it's pretty dramatic when he rips out the heart of Elizabeth.
And she catches on fire. You're like, damn.
Catches on fire, yeah. She
and then
self-immolates.
And then
but
also
like, it's otherwise pretty stuffy movie. Come on, it's full of itself. It doesn't quite.
I think the pacing is really tremendous. I think the fealty to the language of the time is good. I think the costume design is good. By the way, I just want to say, like, this might have been many people's first mainstream picture of what the Frankenstein monster really was like in the book, right? I mean, like the Hammer films kind of.
The Hammer films are even more off than the Universal film. Like, that's just not more unrelated than that.
Yeah. So like when I first saw this, I was like, yeah, I'm getting the real dope here. Like, I'm a really smart audience member because I can watch a Frankenstein movie that doesn't have a green monster. He's like a guy talking. Like that's, what I mean? Like that's sick.
There ain't no hunchbacks in this one.
Right.
There's no peasants with well, I don't know. I guess there kind of are peasants with torches, but they're going after Justine as the to kill her, not the monster.
Yes, exactly. And I love, like, there's just so many beats that are so dramatic. Like Ian Holm coming down the stairs after Frankenstein's mother has died in childbirth, and he's like shirtless, covered in blood, going, "Oh,
I did everything I could."
Yeah.
And this one sort of plays up what Guillermo will do to much more pronounced effect, is the kind of battle between Frankenstein and his own father, which is not in the book at all. In fact, I think the relationship with the father in the book is quite loving.
Yes.
And in the James Whale one, it's like the father kind of has this buffoonish quality to him and looks down on the son, but there's no reciprocation of like animosity there. So this starts here, and it's played up way more in the Del Toro version.
Well, I think
I don't know how I feel about that.
These two films are the most interesting for me to talk about, I think, because in this one you have two auteurs who are putting their own sort of twist on the story. And by the way, I think that the Frankenstein story does resonate with a lot of auteur male filmmakers, because it is, like I said, a story about a man who is sacrificing everything to achieve his goal, which I'm sure many filmmakers can identify with. I mean, you even see here in this
Del Toro
movie,
especially comes out and says this in interviews. Like he's put years of his life into make. This was his dream project.
Yeah, and probably at the expense of a lot of, interpersonal relationships or whatnot, right? Which I'm sure a lot of people feel guilt about, etc. But like you have this situation where Kenneth Branaugh, and by the way, if there is one shocking thing, which is I had not seen Frankenstein Unbound before I watched this, but so I was kind of shocked when Kenneth Branaugh tries to bring Helena Bonham Carter back to life, and she's this deformed, like awful, looking abomination, right? Who sets herself on fire, which as a guy, he married Helena Bonham Carter, right? So she was his.
They did?
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. They were in a very tumultuous affair while he was married. And can you not see that this is like him taking his, his ingenue who he's fallen in love with, and like he's telling the story about how he's twisting her into his own vision, and like it'll destroy her and destroys him as well, right?
Yeah.
Gotta be something subconscious there,
So she was with him before Tim Burton. Okay.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So, but yeah, no, I find it to be very interesting. I've always been a big Kenneth Branagh fan ever since I was a kid, because my mom, I watched Much Ado About Nothing and Hamlet, and when I was a kid, and I thought those were really cool and different. And I like too the inclusion that we don't get in any other of the schizo posting Frankenstein, where he's like, well, how come we're not reading about Paracelsus and all these other goofy, like, 15th century alchemist people that like are awesome, to the college professor? I think that's kind of.
Well, I think the actual where I find stuff to enjoy about this movie is actually the build up up until the creation. I think once the monster is created in the movie, I lose interest in this one because of the reasons that I described before. It feels rushed and shallow at that point. But as we're building up, it actually really takes its time and does justice to the setup of the novel. And I love the interaction between all of the family members and the household as we are in good times, awaiting the dread of what is to come. I think that works really well. And like you said, when he's in college and kind of experimenting and learning his craft and honing his skills, that to me is much more interesting than what we see later on, except for the ending, which I think is absolutely wonderful and beautiful, where they do reconcile in death. And I feel like it's much more earned in this movie than the Del Toro version, where they reconcile and he takes his dead father away to light the funeral pyre. And it's very emotional and moving in this one, and not in the Del Toro one, in my opinion.
I agree. The Del Toro one, it came off as sort of
forced.
I agree. He was forcing an ending that he wanted that he didn't really earn. And I think
because in this one, the relationship between Frankenstein and the monster is much more nuanced and more complex. Complex, I guess, is the word. Is that, yes, there's hatred, there's animosity, but like it's an escalating level of like, you did this, I did that, and they are in conflict. In the Del Toro one, it is completely one-sided. Victor is just a monster to his own creation for no reason. Here, the monster is mistreated. The monster reciprocates in kind, and it's an escalating battle between them before it then resolves. And that's what makes it emotional for me.
I want to say something too about Mary Shelley, if I could, and tie it in with an idea that I think has been a troubling point for all of the adaptions, which is why did Frankenstein want to bring the monster back to? Why did he want to do this? Like, why? Why? Is it just blind ambition? I think Del Toro tries to plant the seed that, and so does Branagh in a much more blatant way, that no one will ever die again. I will defeat death, right? Well, then if that's the case, try to cure death. Don't try to like bring back to life a zombified, stitched together freak, right? That's not helping anybody, But Mary Shelley, and if I could back up my point a little bit on like whether or not this is an anti-Faustian celestial male pursuit novel, which maybe it's not anti, but it definitely makes you ruminate on those ideas. Like her father was a very famous anarchist philosopher and, sort of like socialite guy. And according to her sister, there was mass pressure to achieve and to be well known and to strive for artistic and other successes in life. Right. And her family was just struck by tragedy after tragedy. She ran off with the young Percy Bryce Shelley, already married, who was already previously married when she was 16 years old. And he abandoned his pregnant wife, and they were cast out of polite society. Only Lord Byron, who was a sort of famous womanizer and outlaw, would really take them in. And they eventually ran out of money. I believe all three of her children died. And she recounts in her diaries and letters a dream that she had in which her baby was not really dead. In the dream, they discovered that he was just cold. So they warmed him up by the fire, and then he came back to life. And then she said, I would wake up and experience the tragedy of it being not real. And, after this, Percy Bryce Shelley's abandoned wife killed herself. And then Mary Shelley's sister died of like cholera. So it was just like tragedy after tragedy. And I don't think you can not see an autobiographical interpretation of this book in which I think that she would hope for, can we live a more low profile, normal life? And that was what she was maybe striving for. And I'm sure she had problems with her husband, who was an aspiring artist, right? So I'll defend it from an autobiographical point of view, maybe not from a strictly feminist point of view. But do you have anything else to say about our friend Kenneth Branaugh?
I don't think I have anything else to say about Kenneth Branaugh, but to echo off what you just said, there's also just the pursuit of science for the sake of science and going past the boundaries by which we set for our own ethical standards and producing something that is detrimental. So obviously nowadays that seems very obvious to us, even though we're still living with people making the same mistakes as Frankenstein in this day and age. And we should take a lesson from this book without going into more details of what I think we mentioned it before, what we're talking about. But I think that's a huge part of it as well, is that be careful how far you push the limits, and you should not be playing God.
I think ultimately, I think you're right. And this is why it's not a black and white issue. It's definitely something to think about. Like, yeah, you shouldn't play God in the medical field unless, is it a worthwhile goal to cure death? Maybe. Even
in modern medicine, there for things that are not on the down low, like stuff that's not bad that we're talking about, like creating viruses in a lab or something like that. I'm talking about just pure scientific advancement for the benefit of mankind. There's ambiguity, moral ambiguity with all these things. So, we've had these debates for years about things like stem cell research or IVF, and where one person's morality begins, someone else ends. So these things are still relevant today.
To tie it in with, I read a great book at the beginning of the year called The Story of Shackleton, Endurance. And Shackleton was a great turn of the century explorer who tried to make it to the Arctic Circle. And he was trapped there for 3 years, eating nothing but blubber and like shooting birds. And ultimately he made it back. Check this out. He makes it back after 3 years. Everyone thought he was dead. They make a harrowing escape and they get back to England, right? He says hello to his wife for a week, immediately gets on a boat, goes to America to do a speaking tour, right? So, this was a guy who was very much filled with that Faustian spirit. And now I think ultimately Shelley has won out in her argument. Think about something like, not to say, I don't mean to have any value judgment on the merits of going to Mars, but you will find that people sort of scoff at that idea in a way that they wouldn't about going to the moon in, say, 1940. Right. Yeah. So I think we've lost a little bit of that pioneer spirit here. Right. It's good to have a warning, but go ahead.
Yeah, no. And maybe perhaps focusing on the wrong areas of exploration and advancement. Like maybe there is more merit to going to Mars than there is on advancing AI technology that will have ramifications to potentially destroy the human race,
Problem with the AI technology, though, is the cat's out of the bag, and like we have to do it or somebody else will.
Well, of course. But we got here to the point we are at now because people kept making Frankenstein-like decisions for decades along the way. Yeah. So
very true.
There should be some morality, whatever definition or barometer you have, there should be some morality in the way that we advance technology and medical science. I think is part of the lesson here too.
Absolutely. Guillermo. We both saw this film in the theater because I didn't want to wait first of all, it's a Halloween movie, and I have to wait till November 7th to watch it on Netflix, and I want to see it in the theater. Now, I haven't been the
Exactly.
biggest fan of Guillermo throughout the years. I don't think I've seen his last few movies, but this one it intrigued me for sure, and I like Oscar Isaac, and I have to say overall I enjoyed it.
Okay. Yeah, I liked it, didn't love it. And I think maybe I got too hyped up for this one. I agree with you. Del Toro's been it's kind of like hit or miss. I'll either like love it usually or like sometimes I'll just like flat out hate it. I will be brutally honest. I don't care for The Shape of Water.
I hated that movie.
I don't think that's a great movie.
It was all of his worst impulses in one.
Yes.
I did not like it. Yeah.
Exactly. But a movie like Nightmare Alley, I'm a huge fan. I think it's phenomenal and must see. I would, if you haven't seen that one, I would definitely check that out.
Yeah, like I was a big fan of Crimson Peak, but yeah.
And Crimson Peak is another one. And that is him indulging himself in all the right ways for like Gothic romanticism of the 19th century, like put on screen. Like that to me is like him in his wheelhouse doing what he does best. And I was hoping that this would be something more akin to that. And I think it's somewhere halfway between this and Shape of Water. And that's why I was kind of like, I liked it. I will definitely rewatch this one when it comes out on streaming, because I think there's a lot more that you miss just by a casual one-time watching. But like, it didn't blow me away.
The thing that is interesting about this movie and makes it worth existing is that it does have this one question that no other Frankenstein adaptation, to my knowledge, has wrangled with, which is it really tries to wrestle with the idea of why would Victor Frankenstein abandon his creature? And I think even in the book, it's somewhat opaque. You know, in the book, he says something about, I looked on it and saw how horrible it was, and I decided I had to abandon it, right? And get on with my life, which is strange because, you know, this is a guy who is devoted so much energy into doing this thing and then has sort of this like post-coital moment of like recoiling, you know what I mean? If I could put it in Freudian terms like that.
100%. Yeah.
Right.
And that's why I think the Branaugh version does that. Oh, and the Whale version actually has a great reason for recoiling against the monster, being it is like malevolent. So.
Whereas Guillermo is like only a really sick person who has been traumatized or abused in some way and is carrying along some kind of generational pain would create something and then abandon it. Right. Now, I don't know anything about Guillermo del Toro's own, you know, upbringing or his relationship with his father, but I think it's a little ham-fisted, but it's at least something different for sure. Right. And it is interesting in that it does explore this idea of wrong being done to you and then visiting more pain upon other people, you know, which really kind of obstructs the clean victim narrative that we often see in movies, right? And adds a little nuance to it. Which I think is something that another movie like Yorgos Lanthimos' what was that movie with Emma Stone where she's like a handmaid and is like abused horribly by the upper class, but then when she becomes the upper class, she's like horrible and brutal to everybody else. What was that? The Servant, or what the hell was that called? Someone in the chat.
I don't recall.
Go ahead. You were going to say something.
No. Go ahead. You were on a roll there.
Yeah, no, but I did appreciate that to a certain extent. I thought that Oscar Isaac was a little one note in his cruelty and kind of how he was putting on a big show and being like this 70s rock star kind of scientist guy. He looked like Mick Jagger at certain points, you know.
He was like a carnival barker for a majority of the movie too, hawking his experiments at these university lectures, which in probably every other adaptation or even in the real world, they would have been like, you know, unceremoniously executed probably for crimes against nature for showing what he shows in this movie. I think you just hit the nail on the head, is that for as long as this movie is, and it's 2.5 hours, which I don't have a problem with per se, but what I have a problem here is that the characters feel entirely shallow and one-dimensional here. And that's disappointing because you're not even using the like general archetypes from the novel or other versions to like fill in the gaps. A lot of the characters are just changed so radically that they're wholly like new cloth characters. And so I didn't connect with any of them or feel much of anything for any of them. And that includes the monster too, which I know you're supposed to be empathetic towards in this movie. The only character that I really loved was Christoph Waltz. That was the character who had flair, who had style, who had an edge to this movie. And I was genuinely interested in what he was up to. And that's an entirely new character from no other version whatsoever. So,
but ultimately, I didn't really understand what his purpose was, really.
Well, I don't know what they were thinking when they wrote the movie, but from my interpretation of here is that he was funding Frankenstein's research because he is dying from late stage syphilis, and so his body is dying, and he has some kind of notion that he is going to get his brain implanted into the body, into a new body, into an artificial body. And I think that's what he was hoping for, and that's why they have the struggle that leads to his death. But he doesn't understand that the syphilis has gone to his brain, so the brain is not viable regardless.
Right. Well, ultimately, he serves two narrative purposes, which is to be the sounding board exposition person for Dr. Frankenstein. And then also he serves this convenient role of sidestepping the I'm falling in love with my cousin / half sister experience, which is part of the book. Obviously, Victor Frankenstein's in love with his adoptive cousin. And the Kenneth Branaugh movie takes that one head on and like doesn't even try to hide it and like addresses it like,
yeah,
he's making out with Helena Bonham Carter and he's like, is it okay to love your sister? And kind of like, okay, well,
yeah, well, they're not blood relatives, you know.
Well, they're your cousin, right? I mean, I guess
no. She's completely unrelated. Sure, her parents died of scarlet fever. Yeah, they're not. Well, I don't know if they. I think they don't say it one way or the other in the Kenneth Branaugh movie, but in the book, it's explicitly stated that she is not related to Victor at all.
Is that right? Oh, I misinterpreted that then.
She was an orphan from another family that the mother, like knew or something like that, and then was adopted because she felt pity for her. I believe, from what I recall.
Something this movie does really well, or you know what, it does this. I'm of two minds about the violence in the movie. At once, I think it's appropriate for the creation of Frankenstein. Yeah, you know, Guillermo's going to go buck wild with that. And I mean, we get it. We get explicit. I'm Oscar Isaac sawing off somebody's foot. I'm stitching a knee back, to a leg, which I thought was very amusing and funny. If you look at it through that lens, it's a comical sequence, right?
Yeah.
Now, however,
it's very casual though.
That's why it's funny, because you cut to Oscar Isaac.
But it's very casual and over the top in the way that makes you think. I mean, there's no sneaking around graveyards and there's no hiding anything in this movie. It's all out in the open, which is also bizarre.
Well, and I love lines like when he goes to the gallows where all the men are about to be hung and he smells the guy and goes, "Oh my God, you wouldn't have made it another year. Jesus, you're happy you're getting hung," right? Which was funny. And, but I thought that it was a little excessive where whenever everyone I think there's like 3 people whose like faces and skulls are crushed very explicitly in the movie, which seems like a new thing that like everybody is doing. Like everyone on Game of Thrones gets like their head stomped on and smashed. And I don't know if it was just too hard of an effect to do in the 80s. So kind of like George Lucas with the prequels, we can make ships land now. Everyone's doing that. But like, I mean,
it goes back to, I always think of American History X. There's the curb stomp.
Yeah, but I don't think we see that in that movie, but like,
I think you do actually.
Do you?
From what I recall, I haven't seen it in a few years, but I seem to recall you see enough here when Christoph Waltz falls to his death and then he picks up the body. Half the entire back of the skull is gone, and there's just brain matter oozing out, and that's a great effect.
Maybe I just have a sort of preoccupation with like preserving my own head. So like, when I see these like traumatic head injuries or someone getting their mouth absolutely ripped out of their face, I'm kind of like, okay, is that, necessary? Like this would be a movie I would otherwise have recommended to my mother, but I won't now, and I don't, that's the thing I did kind of like about it. I mean, at one time I felt like, okay, Guillermo, you're being a little immature here with all this violence, and Quentin Tarantino does the same thing. Right. But it does make the movie. I do like it in one way because at the same time, it's this incredibly heartfelt, emotional, and like really kind of loving and sweet movie with this incongruity of this like disgusting and horrible violence. Right. So it makes it a more interesting kind of like package overall for me anyway. You agree or?
No, I agree with you that. And I also agree with you from the ambiance and the atmosphere of the movie. It's just oozing and emanating Gothic, atmosphere from every orifice of it. And when that's what's so appealing to me about the movie is the visual and the atmosphere for it. I think it's weak on story and characters, and that's what really tears it down for me.
I think that he makes so many
weird choices.
He makes so many narrative jumps and changes with the relationships. Like I don't buy the attachment that Mia Goth and Frankenstein have together. Right.
You mean, yeah, especially with Victor, she has no relationship. There is nothing there. I
Well,
mean,
it's weird because
I thought it was
he's
supposed to be that they were going to play up Mia Goth with the monster relationship, which they kind of dance with, but that would have been much more interesting had they actually gone through with it.
this is a case where I did the normie thing and I mixed up the monster and the Frankenstein.
Yeah.
So like what I'm saying, her relationship with the creature,
No, it's very shallow.
you know, I get it from like a shorthand because I know what Guillermo was going for.
So he was
But
going for Shape of Water again, which is the monster
yeah,
with, you know, their human counterpart who's off from society.
well, I
Well,
don't
even
buy
though
it
the
because
character in Shape of Water wasn't really human, I guess. But
right, because you know, if she's this pure soul that can see the goodness in this monster and loves him, then you know, which I suppose is supposed to make her a deeper character than we would originally get in the other stories and more nuanced. But like, why is she marrying the brother? You know, she didn't
and
seem to
why have
mind.
him marry? What? Why have him? Why have her be with the brother? What purpose does that serve? Because in any kind of dramatic love triangle, it should be that Elizabeth is with Victor and that she feels sympathy for the monster. So there's a triangle, love triangle between Victor, the monster, and Elizabeth. So why throw the brother in there? What purpose does that serve at all? Nothing.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that he was like sort of, I don't know. He got over his skis a little bit on what he wanted to change and what he wanted to keep.
Yeah. So
You know,
it's the brother is absolutely useless to the plot. You don't need him at all. In fact, he's in every other version, he's just a catalyst for fodder for the monster to kill, so that Frankenstein can, you know, go after the monster. So I'm not sure what they were going for here.
again, as far as Guillermo's style goes, I feel like it was sort of toned down. You know,
No, I don't think so. I
well,
think
you
this
can
was
always
amped up
tell,
pretty
and
heavy.
I don't know this for a fact, but you could, you know, like, I mean, I used to have a book on Guillermo del Toro back when I was in high school, and it was like purportedly a book of all of his illustrations and how they informed the movies he made. Because obviously famously he has this little notebook where he just draws things,
Yeah.
and you can always tell when he's had some kind of drawing that has then made it into the movie, right? Like I think an instance of that is the coffins of the parents, right? That's
Oh
something
yeah.
that is it's I would call it sort of like an incongruity, or like it stands out because it's like something that seems like it would be of the time but is not,
No.
right? Kind of like a steampunk sensibility, you know,
What
in a
about
different
the
way.
giant? I don't know if it's a Medusa head or it's something on the wall in the laboratory with the open, gaping mouth. That's definitely something that he came up with and drew. Come on.
How comically large the castle is, you know, it's like
Yes.
huge. Like
Why
what would
is
that
there
even
a
mean?
giant funnel pit in the upper portion of the lab that leads down to the sewer? Can someone explain that? I
Or like
don't know, but that's what's great. That's what I wanted to see, more and more of that type of stuff.
okay,
It's
so you
just
agree
when
with me. There
the rest
wasn't
of
as
oh
much
no,
as normal. It was kind of pared down a little bit.
I wouldn't say it's pared down. I just think that it's there. It's just, yeah, maybe it's not maximized enough. And that's what I don't understand is like there's so much happening here, but yet it feels like it's just plodding and lumbering through this kind of meandering story that is not interesting because of all the changes. And I'm not saying we have to be a stickler for the book and everything. Certainly I'm advocating for the James Whale version, which is like, you know, totally divorced from it. But like, why make changes that are dumb? Like make good changes. Like the Branaugh version makes changes to the novel that I think are in its favor. Despite my own reservations with the movie. This one just makes curious changes that serve no purpose.
I did like, though, in a certain way. I mean, it's unpleasant to watch, but I did like how he was willing to make Frankenstein like cruel towards the
Oh, very
monster.
cruel.
I thought that was interesting.
Well,
Um,
I think it goes back to that in the end, who's the real monster? Victor's the real monster. You
but
know,
he has sympathy for Victor at the end. I mean, he lets him die with dignity, and the monster doesn't, you know, smash his face in and destroy his
because the
skull.
monster forgives him. We as the audience are surrogates for the monster, so we forgive him and we forgive this horrible person who was cruel to us. That's kind of where it's going there.
One thing that I didn't appreciate, and I felt like it was almost I didn't even feel like it was characteristic for Guillermo. I felt like it was characteristic for somebody else. Like, but to add in action and fight scene moments where I thought they weren't necessary. Like we get this twice with the monster at the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, he can't just like storm up the ship and like look for Victor. No, he has to have like a cool choreographed fight with
Yes, to
like
have a
6
Marvel style fight scene with the
yeah.
sailors on the ship. Well, that's for the commercial. That's for the Netflix audience, man. Come on.
Okay. And then
you think if they start the movie off with them just like having a soliloquy with Captain Walton and Victor on the ship, that the average Netflix audience is going to sit there and watch this? No, you got to throw in some action scenes.
yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm interested in the idea of him making Frankenstein this kind of character that lives forever. However, that's fine in concept, but to actively show it as being Wolverine style, like
Oh yeah.
regeneration, I'm like,
Well, not even that. The Wolverine style healing factor that the monster has was also something that I did not get down with at all. Like, I understand the monster is always going to have preternatural strength. It's undying to a certain extent, can get shot, whatever. But this was ridiculous that instant healing, like we're Wolverine. Like
yeah.
that was absurd.
It was like 1-for-1 Wolverine, especially when he's actively healing like mid-fight so he can throw another punch. I was like, come on.
No.
I didn't hate it when he was killed by the hunting family and he lies there dead for like, however long and then wakes back up. It's like, okay, that's cool. But
that's consistent though with the undying nature of the monster in all subsequent kind of, except for the Hammer films where they're always recreating the monster. But if you go back to the Karloff version, even though he's played by different actors in all these different movies, like that is the same monster going through the series, even though as he survives death in each one, whether he's burned in the windmill or he's frozen in ice or whatever, there is an undying nature to this creature. But like to have this ridiculous in real time healing is maybe a push too far.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I did like, however, the idea at the end of Victor saying, "Hey, well, you're alive. Why don't you go live your life?" Right? Which is, in a way, Frankenstein's monster, the creature, is breaking the cycle of victimhood, and he chooses not to seek revenge again. And he realizes that I have all of these bad things that have happened to me, but I'm going to embrace life and get out there and like be me, which is, I thought, a nice message. Now, go ahead.
It's a very modern take. Yeah.
Do you think so?
I think it has to be earned. I think it has to be earned though. And I don't see anything in the monster's journey that leads him to that conclusion. Perhaps if he had been shown a more hospitable welcome by the other normal people from the cabin in the woods, perhaps, or something that showed him, besides just the old man who was blind being nice to him and teaching him, I don't think there was anything there that would make him feel that way, that he should forgive and quit going. It works in the Branaugh version because there is, I guess here there's a mutual forgiveness, but like in the other one, it feels like there was the journey together of the two characters was on equal footing, and they come to this realization that they share this kinship, a father and son, and you forgive one another. Yeah. This one, there was such one-sided offense that I don't know how it was forgivable. That's right.
Whereas in the Frankenstein, the novels and the traditional story, there's got to be that tit for tat where it's like you feel bad for Frankenstein, but then, okay, well, you shouldn't have killed the little boy monster,
yeah,
right? And then you start feeling bad for Victor, but then with Victor, you're like, Victor, just make him the mate, dude. Why tear up the body of the mate? Just make him the mate, So it's like they're going back and forth and they're not getting anywhere with each other. And at a certain point, you're like, the fact that they can't come together is like the tragedy of the whole thing, right?
Precisely. And that's the nature of most real world arguments, especially among family members. And then at the end, you have to realize like your family, there's more at stake here than just these petty grievances, and you come together and reconcile. Here, it's like, I don't know what we accomplished.
Well, you know what I did like about this, and it spurred this thought, whether or not it's really saying this or not, but there's always like this idea behind Frankenstein, which is that like Frankenstein didn't ask to be born, and he's put out in the world alone, and therefore he deserves some recompense against Dr. Frankenstein. Well, for me, nobody asks to be born, right? And if you have this idea that like you deserve reparations for that or something as part of like a crime against the universe for like the the crime of being, right? But I think that really what this movie shows is like all he's asking for is a little love and attention. Like he wants to, he's willing to play ball in this new world. He's willing to exist. He just, don't be cruel to him, be understanding. I mean,
And it's an unnecessary and very brazen cruelty for no reason. The monster, refresh my memory from this movie, unless I'm mistaken, is that there's nothing that the monster does that deserves the level of cruelty that Victor puts upon him early on. He does nothing. He is not violent, malicious. He chains him up, and the monster is clearly like this kind of Twilight, sad, romantic, sexy monster to a certain extent. And it's like, there's nothing here that deserves this.
My wife actually explained that to me, because I took my wife, and she found it to be very violent and unpleasant, but also she cried a lot because number one, a deer got killed, and then
shot in the face. Yes.
And then she liked Frankenstein and felt bad for him and was crying at the end. And but
wait,
she made it clear to me
that for Doctor,
for the monster.
Yeah. Okay. So you keep doing that. I don't know who you're talking about when you say Frankenstein.
The
monster.
Creature,
See, no. For me, I know you're supposed to feel sympathy for him, but I didn't feel it.
Well, she said that Jacob Elordi, he has a sort of a characteristic where his eyes droop down, which she said makes him seem more likable.
Well, especially because they accentuate the eyes in the costume design.
Another question I had for you: what did you think of the design of Frankenstein?
Yeah, no, I think as a kind of wholly original aesthetic design for the monster, this was quite good. I like the pale, kind of like almost albino look that the monster has, where you see the monster is like either like almost naked or then fully like with a fully clothed, like including just a slit for the eyes. So there's that. But you see like the actual musculature grafted on and things like that. So I liked it. I think there was a very interesting choice there with the aesthetics. How would it rank in my list? I would say it's better than the De Niro one, if only because the De Niro one is meant to be so kind of understated as that, like he is disfigured and scarred, but like he could sort of pass in the real world. You know what I mean? Like the De Niro one could, I think so. You could say that guy was in some kind of accident and was stitched back together, and you could probably
I got hit with an anchor. I was on, or something.
Yeah, well, whatever. But like this is a not a human-like creature, despite the fact that it's supposed to be. Like it feels otherworldly.
I like the idea of making him very tall too. That was interesting.
Well, they always, right? I mean, they always are. I don't know how the De Niro one was meant to be portrayed in height terms, but the Karloff one was gigantic.
Right, that's true. But I know that Guillermo said he based it off of Bernie Wrightson, to get back to that again. Okay. And like that long stringy hair,
yeah, but it's a very sad monster. It's very sad and gloomy. That's why I said Twilight kind of monster. It's playing off a lot of those sensibilities of what our modern day interpretation of the monster should be, that we as the audience sympathize with them, and maybe the women in the audience want to feel bad for them and want to be with them or something like that,
Well, I think that Guillermo was going for something. Do you remember the butterfly, where we have like a minor dalliance between Dr. Frankenstein and the Mia Goth character, right? Where they kind of make sweet eyes at each other for about 10 minutes. They have a little meet cute moment where he pretends to be a priest, which got a big laugh in my theater, and I found amusing. And ultimately that doesn't go anywhere, I guess.
Nowhere.
I mean, but there was sort of like this fun symbolism where they have this yellow and blue and white butterfly in this cage, which is, parallels the color schematic of Frankenstein the monster himself, right? And which I think also, I think can exemplify Mia Goth's character as someone that feels constrained by, the norms or mores of 18th century society or 19th century.
And the patriarchy.
Yeah. Though it didn't hammer that too hard, I didn't think. And also, another thing I liked, another observation is when you see the monster observe like this sort of cycle of life on this farmstead, where he sees that the wolf doesn't hate the sheep and the man doesn't hate the wolf, but they have to act in this way because we live in this Hobbesian primordial world. And at no point does Guillermo really say that that's bad or inherently wrong. He just kind of acknowledges it as a fact of existence and something that people have to navigate in their real life, which I found. I was happy that Guillermo didn't try to say that there should be a remedy for this, because in my mind there is not one, and then that, like, it also, you know what I'm saying?
No, for sure.
Yeah.
It dabbles in a lot of interesting ideas. I just don't think it needed to be honed down a little bit more. and I think the characters needed to be strengthened. And because it definitely has the strong themes emanating through it, I just don't think all the connections quite make it to there. Like, you can extrapolate a lot of different ideas off this, but like the through lines are not quite, there's a lot of like singed edges here, you know?
You have scenes like that just take up a lot of time. Like Frankenstein, I'm going to burn down the entire mansion, which was cool. But again, it made me feel like, okay, I'm in a Marvel fun ride here where we've got a bunch of explosions and I got to jump down the water pit right before the fire blows up.
But then what is with him doing the going back and being exposed to the backdraft and then having being like, what was that? What was the point? I know the point was to get him injured, so then he feel, or he had a moment of sympathy, but like, was he really going to go back inside and save the monster at that point? Like, come on.
No. And then we have to have him getting his leg completely ripped off, which like, the only reason to do that, I think, is because Guillermo was like, oh, I drew a picture of him one time and he had a fake foot. And I thought that was kind of visually interesting. So we'll do that, which, by the way, I'll give him a pass for, because I do stuff like that, like in my movie, where it's like, well, it doesn't really make sense. I just want this to be in there, which I appreciate.
It was silly. It was silly because he should have known what was going to happen when he opened the door. Come on.
Well, I guess. I mean, there's another moment too where Christoph Waltz, when he's introduced, he has like golden spurs on his boots, right? Which, like, would anybody have had that? It's just like a cool idea that, you know what I mean? And so it kind of,
I hear you.
Bit, like, go ahead. What are you saying?
But no, I was just to go back. Christoph Waltz, like I said before, was probably one of the better characters in this movie, and all the scenes with him shine. He just, has a certain aura and charisma to him that shines throughout this. So I enjoyed his scenes most of all.
Well, I enjoyed it.
Would you recommend this movie? That's also the big question. Would you recommend this movie
to a very particular kind of person?
That's why I'm kind of dour on it too, is because you should be able to say, like, go see Del Toro's Frankenstein. And I would not recommend this to most normie people that I know, because I don't think that they're going to resonate with it. And I think that they're going to be not turned off by the weirdness of it, but it's too long. It doesn't connect by the end, and it makes a lot of weird choices that I just don't think are worth it. So I would say you could watch it on Netflix when it comes out. And then if you like it, you can just turn it off. But like, do not rush out to the theaters to see this unless you're totally into this world. Like,
I would disagree. I think anybody that follows this channel or watches this show,
they're going to want to see it regardless of what we say, because they want to form their own opinion, which is what I would do. But I'm like, I don't think you need to rush out and see this. I think you can wait for it to come on Netflix.
Well, you do. But I had a pleasant experience in the theater. It was only playing in one theater in my town, and I had to, like, those tickets were selling fast, and it was very, very busy. Right. Yeah. Ultimately, though, I got to tell you, I've continued to think about the movie, which is, doesn't happen very often.
No, that's a good sign. Yeah.
I mean, I've continued to be
definitely worth. I think for me personally, it will be worth watching again later on to see what did I miss, what didn't we put together, and I think there's probably more that we are not thinking about that will be evident on a second viewing.
I agree with you. Well, do we have any questions from the old chat? If not, I think this has been a fun show, Ryan. I'm glad we did this. I had a good time.
I'm very glad we did this too. Anytime to talk about horror, and especially we got to talk about another 1930s golden age horror movie. We've done quite a bit. We not only did we do our 30s show, but remember we did White Zombie earlier this year. So we've done 4, 5, 6 1930s golden age horror movies, which is good. Very happy.
And we've had a pretty good Halloween output here, even though, guys, I'm really sorry. I was working really hard on a Prince of Darkness review. I've just been too busy. I've had a lot going on this past month, and it's probably not going to happen. So I have to travel here for work for the next 3 days, and I just don't see myself getting it done. So I apologize. But we do have a secret either Halloween night or Saturday show that we're going to do on a particular movie.
I can't do Saturday because I'm on the road. So
you're on the road. Oh, that's right. You're going to Halloween. I'm
going to Halloween Horror Nights after Halloween. So going to the last day, that they have it.
That's gonna be a big Halloween day. So
what's that?
That's gonna be a big Halloween day. Saturday is still Halloween at that point. Yeah. I mean, come on, it's a 2-day deal. It's good. It's nice to have it on a Friday. So yeah, hopefully we can get it done Friday. But other than that, I'm all Frankensteined out, man. I shot my wad on Frankenstein here.
Yeah, same. I was ready to move on to watch something else in anticipation for Halloween. So
yeah. Hey, 1001 Johnny, thank you for the $5 super chat, dude. Really appreciate that. Really glad you enjoyed the show. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Been fun. Thanks, Ryan, as always.
Thank you, George.
All right, we'll see you next time.